Hey everyone, thank you for joining this week's episode of Soundbites. Today we have Andrew Fraine, co-founder of Automata. What Automata is doing is using AI to generate high-quality marketing content faster than ever, and we're really excited that he took the time to meet with us today. So Andrew, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. How are you today?
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. We're in Boston. We have a lot of snow, but it's nice to talk to somebody who's not suffering quite as hard as we are.
Yeah,
We had a
we have
dusting. I saw like just mere inch, like, I don't know, like a centimeter of snow. It was very, very light
Okay.
just
Well,
weeks
when
ago.
was
So
it?
we're
That was
good.
last week. Yeah, we had the
Yeah.
threat of snow for the last couple of weeks. We actually got a couple, what, an inch or two, 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
3 weeks ago.
And
okay.
that's crippling for North Carolina.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Right.
your 2 feet is our 2 inches, and it's
Right.
just, it's rough.
We're prepared for it. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't know what's going we are
We
always
have no
prepared to be
snow removal
unprepared.
tools. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like you can't get bread or water or milk within a week of that kind of activity happening here. It just shuts us down.
Right. Right.
So yeah, man, like tell us a little bit about who you are, what's your background, and how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah. So my background is in engineering. So I'm the technical sort of asset of Automata. I have a partner who is more on the business and sales side. So we have a lot of complementary skills that we work really well together. So, but my background is in more or less in physics and engineering. So I did my undergrad in physics, and then I did a PhD in electrical engineering, where I focused on experimental quantum optics. So it's very different from marketing analytics and AI. But
For someone in
people,
marketing, can you explain what that is?
yeah.
That just
So
my eye glazed.
yeah, so experimental quantum optics. So first of all, optics is just the use of light to perform various tasks, whether it's to measure something or to communicate or whatever. Quantum optics is using the quantum description of light to do things that you can't do with the classical description of light.
Hmm.
So it's basically you prepare in an environment where the laws of quantum mechanics dominate and the laws of classical mechanics no longer apply. So it's basically exploiting the laws of quantum mechanics to do things you can't do with classical physics.
We set up a rule early on that I wasn't allowed to talk about quantum theory or multi-worlds theory or superposition during
Okay.
these. So
Well,
no, we can violate it all day. It's just I'll go down rabbit holes of all kinds of
well,
existence, existential things.
this is the one to talk about that. So if you have any questions, fire away. um, but yeah, so I was more or less, in the lab designing experiments, in the fabrication lab, making devices and doing a lot of computational analyses of physical systems. So there was a lot of it was heavy computation. There was heavy sort of experimental analysis. So a lot of the skill set that I developed during that time is transferable to data science and machine learning and understanding how to analyze and make sense of data. And I always say, I think it's rightly so, that physicists are definitely the most arrogant of the scientists because they think there's nothing that they can't understand because they look at everything from first principles. So, my advisor always said, if something's broken, like, hey, advisor, it's broken. That was never an option. It was, okay, somebody made this, so you take it apart and fix it. There's no like, let's go buy something new. So I look at sort of what we do through a very similar lens where you look at everything from first principles and build up from there. So the skill set from physics and engineering is you know easily transferable to data science, data analytics, and things like that. So that was my background before starting this company.
When you and I met, you and I think like immediately bonded over that fact, right? Because we both do different things in the marketing realm, but we do it from the approach of scientific process, first principles methods, strategic problem solving, versus more of a traditional marketing approach, which is deeply involved in the creativity and the emotive. And I think this will work. It's like, yep, that's all wonderful. And we believe that and we love that.
Mm.
But let's test it now.
Let's find out.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really about you need both to be successful. You can't have one at the expense of the other.
Right.
So you can't have all just like everything needs to be data driven, but there also has to be some level of creativity and humanity
Yes.
in the marketing itself.
Yeah.
You
And
need
that's
to
a lot
get to
of
the things
that's a
that
lot
you'll
of the
test.
yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of the messaging we have with our company, where we're trying to find ways that AI systems can complement the creative, expert who's the marketer who understands, you know, their audience, who understands the product, who understands how to talk to, you know, their potential customers. You know, there's a lot of talk about AI replacing marketers or AI replacing people. I think that's not really going to happen in the short term, and I think it's a really bad idea anyways, for exactly this reason. There needs to be a partnership there, because there are some things that, you know, the person can do that the machine just really is really terrible at, and vice versa.
How
I
do you
think we
allay a
talked.
marketer's fears with that? You know, I think a lot of marketers are maybe afraid of things they don't understand, especially in the data science and AI space, sort of taking their jobs and making them irrelevant rather than being a useful tool to make them more effective.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you say to calm them down?
What we do is we give them real examples of really bad things that AI puts out, even though we're trying to
Hmm.
sell this tool. You know,
Yeah,
like, hey, this is what it can do really well. This is what it does really poorly, and this is why we still need you. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
we say, okay, this can sit next to you. It's like, you know, multiplying your team by a factor of 2 or 3. You can just generate more ideas, but they still need to run through the filter of, you know, you, the expert, who has a, you know, a head on your shoulders and can understand what's being put out, especially in the automated content generation in world, which is what we're in. There's a lot of companies who are saying, just hit go, write an entire blog post and throw it on your website. Like, that's going to be a terrible blog post,
it's not
almost
going to be great.
almost certainly. It'll be logically consistent within the blog post, but it's not how humans write.
Right.
We get hit with ads from, I think, that company all the time. Starts with a J,
Mhm.
and like it looks awesome. Like on paper, it's a great idea, but
Yeah,
we were talking with somebody doing AI in the HR space, and they referred to AI as assistive intelligence, right? Like really, you're creating tools to help people, to augment people, to do the things that computers do really well, so that you can let humans do the things that they do really well,
yeah,
and then get a better outcome because of it. And I think too many people think that, you know, artificial intelligence or generated content is going to replace that marketer, when it's really not. It becomes the tool, like a combine harvester, that helps you do more work faster and get a better result, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think another way is to, you know, really just, it's to demonstrate the limitations. You know, that's really, you know, don't hide the fact that the product can't do XYZ. You know, I think
Yeah.
that honesty resonates with people. Yeah.
We were in the semiconductor space before we were here, and one of the big things that we had was trying to get people to use LED technology for everyday lighting, right? That was a big push, and the technology was there; it could do it. But everyone's first experience with it was so tainted because they had really crummy product. They saw compact fluorescents that were green and really crummy experience, so they thought everything that was energy efficient was a compromise and it was trash.
Mhm.
So because of that terrible first experience with respect to their expectations, the adoption took longer.
Right.
But now you don't even think about it. It's just what's used. It's just the way. You don't even use the name of the technology anymore. And we had a conversation about MP3s. Like, when's the last time you heard the term MP3?
Right.
Like, people use the technology name when it's new and exciting, and then it just becomes the way. And I
Right.
mean, if you ask somebody that's born in the late '90s, they might not even know the term too well. They
Right.
don't need to.
And I think that will be the case for AI assisted tools. The same. You know, when we started this company, like machine, nobody said AI in 2015. Everyone was saying machine learning, machine learning, machine learning. Now nobody says, like, machine learning doesn't have the same, you know, feeling
The
attached to it.
excitement.
Just like, okay, it's just, yeah, I can fit a line to some data. That's not that cool. Now AI has this whole thing where it's like, okay, you're doing machine learning, now you're making business decisions with it.
Yeah.
So that, I think, eventually, like you said, it's just a tool that sits along people like any other tool that we use. And, you know, the conversation of, is it AI, is it not AI, is it real, is it not real, it's like, it doesn't matter if it solves a problem, right?
Yeah.
Like, who cares what you call it? I think eventually, really quickly, we'll get there.
Where
I
do
think
you
it's AI
think we
until it
where do you
works.
think we are in the adoption curve for marketers? You know, you talk to a lot of marketers all day. Like, are they, you know, once you get them over the hump of saying, okay, it's not going to replace my job, there are limitations, they need me. Where do you think they are in terms of adoption?
Specifically, content marketers and copywriters, they're very hesitant to
Hmm.
even bother with one of these things, because what they do is really sort of a craft that they've perfected over the years, right? So it's really like, can this help me, and is it worth it? Right? So there's we've heard a few times from various marketers, like, I'm not an editor. So if you give me a bunch of content from an AI machine and now I have to edit, that's just a completely different skill set. So that's another sort of hurdle that we have to cross. And we have to format the text in a way that, doesn't make it seem like they're just editing someone else's text. It's really just giving you ideas. It's giving you inspiration. It's giving you, different ways to, like, send you off a perpendicular path of creativity that you might not have reached otherwise. So those sort of nudges, rather than just here's some text, edit it, publish it. But I think in terms of adoption, the things around data analysis is probably much more widely used now in terms of predictive analytics. Who's going to buy what, who's interested in reading, XYZ. But in terms of actually generating content, especially in the enterprise, I think it's very early, and I don't think there are many enterprise, companies using this at scale. It's still very much a cool thing that they're interested in, but let's not, deploy this throughout our entire marketing, platform.
We run in with our customers a lot. We run into this a lot. Like, we'll help them build a strategy and get to a really data-driven place, and then get to a spot where we can collect a lot of data. And then when it comes to their execution, their ability to actually create long-form content, digest that into mid-size content and really small content, being able to create the level of content they need to be able to get the outcome or the results they want. In the early time, they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Long time out, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks after strategy is delivered, like, you just see the content amount just decrease almost to nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like things that you guys build can help bolster that and keep the content volume a lot higher than if somebody has to do it.
Right. Yeah. Because what we focus on is a lot of repurposing existing content. So if you spend 3 weeks doing a big case study or an ebook or a webinar or something like that, we take the key topics from that and we spit out different types of content formats, whether it's for a landing page or if you want to distribute 100 different LinkedIn posts to all of your employees and say, hey, promote this piece of content. Here are some ideas of how you can post that on LinkedIn. And the other thing we're really focusing on is implementing these solutions within companies' given workflows. So we're not trying to replace anything that they're already using. We're trying to slip in, a solution that's already within their ecosystem. I found that a lot, like, there's a lot of hesitation and around, adopting a new thing for your employees to log into. And it's as simple as that. It's very cumbersome to say, okay, everyone needs to come here, make an account, learn the platform. There's some tutorials, blah, blah, blah. What we've started to do is we literally just detect a piece of content on someone's website. We send out emails to all these subscribers that say, new piece of content. Here are some LinkedIn posts that you can use. Here's a link to, LinkedIn to post. So like, it's very, very low friction to actually derive value. And I think, especially when there's already friction in the technology itself, in the concept, in terms of using AI to generate content, we want to minimize friction everywhere that we can. So in the workflow is another thing we're tackling.
That makes a lot of sense because, people don't want another tool. They want a solution, but they don't want another tool. And then when we talked about disruption before, the hardest part about building a disruptive technology or a new technology is injecting yourself into the habit cycle of that end user. Like, are you going to be able to change their behavior to get them to do something else? Mm-hmm. And if you can, like you said, make that as frictionless as possible, you can become part of that habit cycle easier than, oh gosh, what's my password? I need an admin to reset it. I have to log into this tool, and then you don't have to use that much intent to be able to get the result you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you were studying physics, you went to got a PhD in EE, and then you moved into marketing.
Yeah.
What was that transition like?
Yeah. So I have a good friend of mine who I've known for 20 years. So we grew up together. He was at a startup, which was an intent data marketing play. So they were doing a lot of data around intent. They got acquired. And previously they had hired me to do a short-term project for them, so that I was kind of aware of what they were doing, just a little data science project. They were acquired, and he decided to leave the acquired company and start his own thing. And his enthusiasm brought me into the fold. And he said, hey, you can basically build whatever we want to build, full full license to be as creative as we want. You build it, I'll sell it. And that was really attractive to me, especially from where I was coming from in academia. The career paths in academia are really, really tough, especially at a research university. To get a research position, ultimately you want to be a research professor. That's like the end goal of staying in academia.
Sure.
And the only way to do that at a good university is to get a really hard postdoc where you're going to spend 6 or 7 years in the lab, get paid almost nothing, and then maybe you'll get a job as a professor. So that sounded pretty miserable to me. So I decided to, but I did like a lot of the qualities of being in academia are really great in terms of sort of intellectual freedom, especially the group that I was in. Our group was really free to explore any path that we wanted to. And I really, really liked that. Learn new tools, learn new techniques. So I wanted to keep that aspect to my day-to-day job, but I also like the freedom of time, things like that. So this seemed like a good option. So we just started building out different tools, talking to customers, talking to a lot of the people that he already knew in the industry. We made a lot of really bad products that nobody wanted, but there was a lot of learning there too. So yeah, so it was pretty seamless transition actually. So I finished the PhD, his company got acquired, and we started working together just like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a ton of, categories and places where AI can really be leveraged. It sounds like there's a little bit of friction right now in the marketing space, but your business partner's excitement really got you on board. What is exciting you about this opportunity in the marketing space? Like what gets you moving each day?
Yeah, I think I think we're focusing on marketing, which is a really nice industry to sell to because oftentimes there's a really clear ROI attached to what you're doing. And I do think there's a lot of applications in other areas of what we're doing in other industries. So we can help sales. We can help people writing academic journals in terms of research and AI content generation and things like that. But marketing in terms of generating text, and what we've been doing this whole time is a lot of natural language processing, a lot of large scale text analytics, which is really what that's been our bread and butter the whole time. And I think marketing is just a really great application for text analytics because their job is to write content for their audience to read and engage with. So I think it is the perfect um, sphere of where this technology can be applied. There are a lot of other industries that it can be applied, but I think it's going to be a much tougher sell.
Yeah, I think we landed on marketing for a few reasons too. And what's been interesting is the opportunities are really ripe, and there's this little disconnect that we're trying to, as a team, overcome. And it's that data scientists, engineers, physicists end up using jargon and buzzwords that end up not making people think you're smarter. They make it seem like it's less accessible,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when we get in front of marketing teams and we start using words, we've had to change our messaging a lot so that we don't just like confuse somebody and be like, yeah, that sounds really complicated and difficult to use, and there's a lot of magic there. Let me know when it's get ready for game time. We're not there yet.
Right.
Overcoming that is tough, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a benefit from someone like us who come from a very technical background coming into marketing. We understand how to communicate complex ideas to my mom and dad. So like they had no idea what I was doing in the lab, but I had to explain it to them somehow. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work there to be done. Another thing, so when I started working in marketing, my wife was currently working in marketing, and at the same year she actually quit her career, started being a science teacher. The same year I quit science, started being marketing. So there's a conservation of science and marketing in our household. So I think that's another nice balance.
That's funny. That's it. Someone I know was in the marketing space, and she left and became an AP physics teacher.
Ah.
So it's kind of a
Yeah, maybe
kind of
it's
interesting.
just the grass is always greener on the other side. So once you've gotten enough of something, you need to try something the polar opposite.
Yeah, yeah. And so you, based on what the tools you guys build, like you mentioned, a lot of the math. What we learned too is the math that you're using for marketing analytics. You can use basically the same math for IoT data. Anything that's time series, it's effectively the same. It doesn't matter what the categories are that you're analyzing. Um, so you guys are focused on marketing, but have you noticed that too? Like a lot of the mathematics that you're building just transcends to all kinds of different use cases. And which use cases do you think are the juiciest?
Yeah, I think, we're really focusing on this language generation, but in terms of real impact, I think if you look at the industries that are really drowning in text and drowning in the amount of content they need to produce, I think those are probably the ripest industries to target after this. However, it often comes with a lot of regulation and overhead. So, like for example, the legal industry, like
Yeah.
I have a few friends that are lawyers, and all they do all day is read and write. So there's definitely an opportunity for a tool there to help them do that, but there's a lot of liability there as well. So they need to go through this with a fine tooth comb. And along the same lines, in the biotech and the medical industry, we've been told by a biotech company, like, yeah, this could be useful for us, but our brand guidelines are so strict because we're selling drugs that we could never ever use a tool like this. So that we're highly trained in what we can say, when we can say it, on what types of products. So there are definitely industries that could use something, but it's not ready for something that's so new. And in terms of the math being the same for all industries, what we found is that we rely on experts in the AI field to build products that we can use. Like we use GPT-3 and another tool called Cohere in Canada. So they're big natural language generation platforms. There's no way you or I could build that platform, right?
Billions of neurons that have been
Yeah.
created already.
And the only way something like what we're building could work is if you use a tool like that.
Yeah.
So we're transitioning to really just a user of AI platforms and machine learning platforms, rather than really rolling up our sleeves, doing the feature engineering, building the models ourselves, because the amount of data that you need to really build impactful models is just not available to us, and in what we're doing. So that is a big challenge.
Even if you had the data, the level of compute power to create a model off of it, out of reach. And we're in the same boat. We call it turtle stacking, right? If someone already built something and they did a really, really great job of it, just use it and build your solution or your service on top of it.
And that's a really, and these companies know that. So like what they do is they allow you to fine tune these big models, the last few layers of these neural nets with your own data, to fine tune it to be specific for your use case. So what we do is, if we're working with a cybersecurity company and they're trying to produce blogs about very specific technical content, we actually fine tune these models with 10 or 20,000 blogs and content from industry leaders in the cybersecurity space. So that's how we add our value on top of these models that are just out of the box pretty good, but they're trained on Reddit and things of all kinds of nonsense, which we want to suppress as much as possible.
So we've used this example before, but we ended up in a situation where we were building a not content generation tool, but a retargeting tool to go after different audiences and expand an audience. And very, very, very early in the model, a guy that was running a WRX car club group liked it and shared it. And then multiple people in that community were on it, and then it got shared, and then it was all of a sudden everybody with a WRX in North America was on the content, and it was like completely the wrong target audience.
Yeah.
But it just shows, when you try to build tools from scratch and you haven't taken everything into consideration, how these models can overfit and get you in a bad spot.
Right.
I'm curious, as we're chatting here, you guys are super technical. I'm more of the marketing side. I'm curious who your decision makers are when you're proposing this tool, and has that changed since you started, or maybe has their skill set changed and you can have these conversations a little more effectively? What have you noticed there?
Yeah, so we're still experimenting in terms of trying to identify our real ideal title at a company. It definitely depends on the size of the company. Yeah. For smaller companies, we found, founders are really interested in this because, their goal is, from in terms of how they can impact the marketing, function of their company, they're the leader, right? So they're very much trying to be thought leader, and they want to. There's a big trend right now in terms of, getting all of your employees to be thought leaders on your content, especially on social media. There's a lot of data that says, the more of your employees share your content, the more, it helps with recruiting new employees, which is a big function of founders. and it helps with brand awareness in general. So founders for small companies are great, and then managers and directors at the larger companies. That's who we're looking at right now, because they're sort of overseeing the functions, the marketing operations of the team in general. We've seen some brand, sort of more of the brand managers like this, especially from the social aspect, because in a very similar way with the founders of a small company, they have responsibility to sort of spread the message, spread brand awareness, get your employees engaged, things like that. But in general, marketing ops seems to be relatively interested as well, just because they usually oversee the technology stack that the company is using from a marketing perspective. But yeah, it's a tough thing to figure out, I think, for any new product, but we're definitely iterating quickly on that.
Yeah, and I think the secret there is getting as many at bats as humanly possible to start filtering out
Right.
who can make that decision and who can't, right?
Yeah.
And I would say for a tool like yours, it's really for me, it would be a volume conversation. I've run really small teams at very large companies, right? So it's like the expectations were high, but the resources were really low.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the last team that I oversaw, we had one copywriter who was doing all of the blogs, social content, website content, direct mail content. So she was spread really thin. And so it's, for me, if you were to come to me as the former director, it would be like, oh, great. You're telling me you can 10x my output and work from a draft. I used to work for somebody who loved to work from drafts. And so I was that person. But if I were the editor of that content, and if it meant 10xing my output, it would be interesting to me. So I wonder if there's a sweet spot in terms of company size as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely an argument to be had about a ratio between size of content marketing team to size of company. If it's a really small team within a really large company, then this probably is a good fit because of the volume play, or number of blogs posts relative to the size of the marketing. The other challenge right now, especially in the content marketing area, is there's more and more outsourcing to freelancers and agencies. So in-house teams are probably producing less content than ever. There's been a few studies on that recently. So we're also looking at selling into agencies who have a lot of writers. Sell it once to an agency who has 50 or 60 writers. The other thing that is a benefit for a tool like ours is that if you're a writer at an agency, you might have a fintech client, you might have a cybersecurity client, you might have a retail client, and it's really hard to be an expert across 10 different industries, right? So we'll train an instance of these big language models on each of those industries. So you can just select which one you're working on. It's fine. It's already pre-trained on 10,000 articles from retail companies or 10,000 articles from fintech companies. So your AI assistant is an expert on what you're trying to write. So it can help you along in a way that's very different than, maybe working with someone else in your office that is also not an expert in what you're trying to write. So that's another.
I think it's a huge selling point. I've worked at agencies where I was helping, renewable energy, solar, LED, and then it was like you were trying to write copy for 4 different brands,
right.
And then you don't want to look like the idiot to your client. It's like you want them to think that you're a subject matter expert, but at the end of the day, you're just a 25-year-old kid trying to make sense of all of this technology. Right. So having a tool like that, I think would have been, in my formative years, would have been very, very helpful, and it would have maybe gotten a few hours more of sleep.
Yeah, that's another tool that we sell in the market right now is a competitive intelligence dashboard for content marketers, and that was the original idea. Was that we'll put together an industry specific dashboard that monitors, say, the top 20 solar companies, and what we do is we look at all their blogs, all their social. We look at how each piece of content is performing. We look at the key topics across all their content. We look at the technical SEO. We look at audience analytics across each of these companies, and then in a single dashboard, you can say, okay, I'm writing, a 2,000 word piece for my solar client. Let's go pull up the solar dashboard and see what these industry leaders are talking about. Maybe I can get some ideas. Maybe I can understand, what the audience is engaging with from the top 20 solar companies. So that the messaging there is very similar and has nothing to do with actually creating the content. It's really from the research stage. And the reason we built the AI content generation is because the feedback we got from that product is that this is great, a lot of great data here, but there's nothing actionable about this. Like, what am I going to do? So what we do is we take the data essentially from these dashboards and we feed it into the AI models. And that's what we use to fine tune these models. So you can use both now. You can look at the competitive intelligence dashboard, and like one of our agency clients, they subscribe to 16 dashboards across very specific verticals. So like one of them is DevOps. All the DevOps companies in a dashboard. One of them is, cloud security. One of them is, ed tech. So what they do is when they're pitching new clients, say they're pitching a new ed tech client, they pull up the ed tech dashboard and say, this is how we keep, tabs on the ed tech industry. This is how we're uniquely positioned to understand your industry specifically. So that, that from an agency perspective, how do you be an expert at everything? This type of tool, helps them do that as well.
Yeah, that's huge because again, when you're a technical resource at a big company, you end up in a situation where you almost distrust the agency partners working on things as not as valuable. But those are expensive resources, and being able to have a tool like that to make agencies more powerful and more successful can help show their value inside of an organization outside of just the marketing piece of that org.
Right.
We deal with a lot of people trying to optimize SEO. I guess optimization is redundant in that sentence. Yeah, but in PPC, right? And I feel like those kind of tools can put you in a significantly better place, especially when you're trying to generate content for SEO and you're trying to be on the right PPC keywords.
Yep.
So yeah, we could probably nerd out about a lot of the super technical cave trolley stuff all day. But what was the most surprising thing you learned on this journey so far?
So I think,
or a hypothesis that was devalidated, that just kind of like, oh man, I thought that would be great, and it wasn't.
So our very first idea, in hindsight, is really bad, but it was sort of it was the lowest hanging fruit at the time. So right away, our first idea was around mining sales leads on Twitter. So this is a really bad idea, and for the reason is people don't want to be reached out to on Twitter to buy something. They absolutely hate it. So what we were doing is we were selling specifically to real estate companies, and we would say, real estate company in San Francisco, we're going to monitor every instance of somebody mentioning that they're moving or looking for an apartment in the San Francisco area. What we're going to do is have you reach out to them in a DM or tweet at them saying, hey, we can help you find an apartment. Like, we thought that was a great idea because we're identifying intent, or a real person that needs something, and you want to offer that service to somebody. We're going to help you connect that dot. But what we found is that people hated that. People absolutely despise a company knowing that a company's reading what they're saying and trying to sell them something. So we found out that pretty quickly, but that was a little surprising. We thought that was a great idea, but I think there was a reason why nobody's doing that. And we found that out.
On the surface, I'm like, oh man, that seems like it's an interesting idea. But we've had a few things where we're like, this is going to be a banger. And then we tested it and it was just terrible.
Yeah.
It's so funny how that happens sometimes, because you think of yourself as being pretty logical, or like, I would use that. And then you find out the market does not care.
Yeah, I think it for us, it always stems from, we have a tool, let's find a solution to use this tool, right? So like, we had a cool way of understanding, text and data on Twitter, which is nothing crazy, but we developed a process and infrastructure around it. Like, okay, how can we use this? We just found the wrong solution for it, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think we have, like, especially me from the technical side, like I'll start digging into a cool technology like Elasticsearch or something that's really, really powerful. And we look around and say, okay, how can we use this, rather than let's talk to our customers and figure out what's going on and what their problems are, and to just develop a tool for that. I think as we've progressed over the years, we've started from there more and more, and it's helping.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was chatting with my parents who were in town this weekend, and my 89-year-old grandma was in town, and they understand that they're putting information out there and then they're getting all these remarketing ads. But I think there's a balance for companies, because they know it, like, people know what's happening, but they don't want companies to be super overt about it. And so it's finding that balance between how do you leverage that data in a non-creepy way, especially with all these iOS updates and privacy conversations. It's really finding a way to utilize the data in a non-creepy way that gets customers to convert, but not feel like they're being stalked or watched.
You want the companies to lie to you a little bit.
A little bit.
They don't want to know what's going on. But even
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like even when you're going to go meet with a prospect or a client, you don't want to just come out and be like, "Hey, I know you got 3 kids and one of them plays soccer." It's like I did my research on the person, but I don't want to be like, "So how's Sarah doing today?"
Right. Yeah.
It makes people feel
creepy.
uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
good.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a skill set for a tactical salesperson, and luckily I don't go on that many sales calls, so I think my partner handles that. So I think I'm much more direct, and when we're on calls together, like I'm the one who just cuts to the chase like right away, and he's still talking about like whatever
Football game was on.
soccer game because he's really great at sort of relating a sports specific topic into whoever we're talking to. So he's a big sports guy. So he's a lot with the small talk, and I'm more just like let's get down to it. But I think you need the small talk a little bit too.
I think in our group, Lauren's the sports guy, and not
Dude,
so
I
much
can't.
over here.
Yeah, it's just growing up in the South. You gotta like
Yeah.
college football, college basketball. It's non-negotiable.
So wait, we're gonna pause really quickly. Can you hear that? Can you hear the dueling leaf blowers now?
No,
That's
there's
incredible.
also table saws right outside mine. This is
I can hear you.
great. Love what's happening. Yeah,
Yeah,
they like literally had like a drill at one point. I was like, oh my god, I'm just hoping that these things are filtering appropriately. It was bad.
Yeah, I mean, we'll clean it up in post. But I was like, oh man, this is like they're having a contest to see who can be the loudest with a leaf blower right now, like right
Especially
outside my window.
when you get multiple, their frequencies start beating against each other.
Yes.
You get the harmonic balances off of them. That's hilarious. Um, okay, so what's exciting you the most about what's the potential? Like, what does the future look like? What's really exciting you about the art of the possible?
Yeah, I think both my partner and I just really enjoy the process of building a company on a personal level. It's something we take a lot of pride in, and I think we're just the right amount of stubborn to just keep going, even though it's really hard, especially going from services to product and that kind of thing. But in terms of the industry, I think I'm really excited about helping companies understand that AI and data science is a tool, and that's it. I think there's way too much hype around what it is, what it isn't, what it's going to do to humanity, and all of these things. And I think it is powerful in the sense that it can impact a lot of you know social social environments in a negative way, and I think we've seen that. But I think if you look at it as a tool in an isolated environment, it can be really impactful. I think it shouldn't be looked at as any way other than that. So from a branding and story perspective, and being able to build technology with that mindset, I think is really important for all companies to start doing more. Because AI is a great marketing tool. It's a great thing to say, and people will open your email if you mention it. But at the end of the day, it needs to solve a problem. So I think
No, I think that's right on. We've been trying to break this down for a little bit into awareness, access, and action. Like if you can make someone aware, to your point, that it's a tool, that it's not completely magic, but it's something for your toolkit, and then you give them access to it, you demystify all the buzzwords out of it. You demystify all of the things that make it not accessible to people that aren't super technical,
mm-hmm.
and then you can take action on it, right?
Right.
And we've been thinking about that a lot, and we've been really trying to focus the messaging on how do you demystify and make it so a lot of people have access to these great tools to be able to do more with less, because I think we're in a position where everyone is having to do more with less.
Right.
Even huge companies, we see big teams and we end up talking to their marketing organizations, and they are shockingly small. Like you will have a $5 billion company with 4 people responsible for all of the messaging,
right.
all of the content across 10 product lines that they might not necessarily be deeply involved in,
right.
but still are responsible for it.
Right. And I think a lot of it is, they don't, fundamentally marketers don't care about AI. They don't care about the technology that you're using. So I think really focusing on the problem that they have and the solution that, AI or whatever tool you're making, how it addresses that problem. I think ultimately that's what all messaging should be, right?
Sure.
A lot of times the technology is new and exciting, and that gets people's attention, but ultimately they don't they don't care. Like they're not going to buy a thing just because you're using a tool or you're using a specific technique. And I think that's, we were talking a little bit about, quantum stuff earlier, and that's how quantum computing is now. It's really exciting and really cool and really, powerful, but it's really far away from actually doing anything useful, right? And I think people fundamentally understand that because they're not seeing anybody using quantum computers for anything useful. But I think AI has already gone through that progression where it was really cool, really exciting, and for a long time, it wasn't very useful in real world scenarios. And now we're finally getting to the point where, okay, it's actually useful. It can actually solve problems. So how do we change the messaging from there's this magical tool that can do all kinds of things that you'll never understand to it can just help your company make more money, period. Like that's ultimately what they care about.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to summarize it. I think that's going to be the sound clip we snap out of here for sure. I'm going to take a quick. I'm gonna take a sidebar into quantum computing, but quantum computing is fascinating for so many reasons, and I think people think that what quantum computing is going to do is solve today's problems but faster. But really, it solves different problems, right? That you'd not be able to solve effectively with today's computers, and they have to be super duper unbelievably cold near absolute zero to be able to function properly, and any noise ruins the answer, and you have to create entanglement. And I think all of those things are why you're not going to have one on your desktop in the near future.
You'll never have a quantum computer. I mean, maybe it'll be funny to look back on this in 20 years, but there's no way you'll ever have a quantum computer in your
It
phone.
solves different problems.
That's what they said about the internet.
I know.
Don't
So
forget.
maybe you will. The technology will have to be wildly different than what it is now, right? So, right now, I mean, you could replace a data center with quantum computers for sure. Like that's the idea. You're replacing servers with quantum computers, not your processor on your desktop. So
running at absolute zero with a thermal pack on it.
Yeah, it's funny because I subscribe to the Harrow, Help a Reporter Out, if you're familiar.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Me too.
So recently there was one which was something along the lines of how long will until we have quantum computers in our pocket, and it took a lot of restraint to not respond to that one, but I ultimately didn't. But I think you'll never they require very close to absolute zero. They're huge, but people said that about the machines required to train AI models too. So eventually you do solve things. It's really just a technical limitation, but it's a really, really big one.
And like consistently generating noise-free entanglement. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, a way to do that is what I was working on is in the optical regime, because you don't need low temperatures. You're very limited by the number of entangled bits that you can create. So my thesis was engineering photonic entanglement for practical applications. That was the title of it. So we were doing a lot of measurement. So
I love the for practical applications.
Yes, because we were in the engineering department. So what I was doing is I was designing sources of entangled photons to address very specific measurement objectives. So we were trying to measure something called polarization mode dispersion, but it was in telecom switches. So we actually partnered with a company who was making telecom switches, and they wanted to measure this property of their switch that you couldn't measure with current classical tools. So we developed a source of entangled photons to make that measurement possible. So that was actually the first demonstration of using a quantum state in optics for a real, device
practical application
being sold, in the market. So that was the practical applications. It was in the lab, and the measurement worked like once. But I published a paper, and the company was happy because they could put out a press release. So that was.
Oh, that's a win-win right there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then
they get attached to that thing, and then they help a reporter out, starts asking how long till this is in your pocket, and then it's full circle.
Exactly. And then we did a lot of around like biological sensing of different symmetries in molecules and things like that. You can engineer quantum states to do that better than classical optics. So there are some practical applications that could be used, I would say, but probably aren't yet.
Yeah, I think that the best application of quantum computing is when you have few inputs but huge number of potential outputs, right? I think those are it's fantastic for quantum computing, where AI is like huge number of inputs for a few potential outputs or an optimized output.
Yeah, because the way most quantum computers work now is you prepare in an initial state. You have a bunch of atoms and you prepare them in an initial state. and then you just let them go. You let them relax into a steady state, like lowest energy state of the system, and that is essentially the solution of the problem that you set it up
Yeah.
as the initial condition. And it does that much faster than it's basically a random walk, but your random walkers are all entangled together, so they can explore a larger space of your possible solutions faster. So it's
That's awesome.
kind of
I
cool.
think, man, we literally cut a whole quantum section out of this and posted too. Um, so we're getting close to wrapping up on time, but we wanted to talk through what if you could go back and have dinner with yourself at, let's say, 18 years old or 25 years old, and you can pick. What would you say? Like, what advice would you say to yourself if you could go back, have dinner, just chat through?
Yeah, I would probably tell myself to say no more often. I'm definitely someone that if someone comes to me with like an idea that looks promising, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. But that leads to being severely oversubscribed and doing three things as half as well as you could do one thing really well. So I think more focus. I think I'd probably like to have over the past 15 years. I think. Yeah.
Is that something that you've gotten better at over time, just out
Yeah,
of necessity?
I have personally, especially once
Yeah.
you start, real life starts kicking in with, bills and kids and things like that.
That'll do it.
I think you really have to focus on one thing and try to do it really well. And from a company perspective too, I think we've learned that also. We build so many products, and a lot of times we're building 3 or 4 products at a time because who knows what's gonna stick in the market. But I think really doing your homework up front, saying no to everything else, even if there looks like there's some legs there. I think that's really important.
You really get to leverage that explore exploit model.
Right.
I think the last question that I want to ask, just as a marketer, what books or podcasts or maybe LinkedIn groups would you recommend for marketers who are trying to understand the AI space better and want to be more knowledgeable? So when they talk to folks like you, they can understand the benefit a little more easily.
Yeah. So the things for marketers, I think, right now there's not a lot of thought leadership on this outside of the companies that are actually doing it. So if you're looking at like the practical applications and how to use this technology, I think following, until there are like marketers at big enterprise companies who are big advocates of this type of technology, which I don't think there really are yet. I would probably follow the CEOs of the companies that are talking about this. So like a big one is Copy AI. So those guys are really building the company. I mean, they say they're building the company in public, so they're really sharing everything that they're doing. So I would follow the founders and people working at the companies who are offering these types of solutions at this point, since it's still so new. That's probably what would be my recommendation on content to consume.
Cool. And then, are you
Cool.
reading any books for fun when you're in your downtime?
So last year I decided to read all the books that I was supposed to read in high school. So I read a lot of like the classic books. So I read Fahrenheit 451, 1981, Catcher in the Rye. I read
To Kill a Mockingbird. Did you
Kill
take that?
Mockingbird was my most recent one. So I
What
think
were you reading instead if you weren't reading these in high school?
I just was like doing math and stuff. I
Cliff
wasn't.
notes. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I was reading physics books. Yeah, so yeah, I had fiction always felt like a sort of a waste of time to me, but now I really enjoy it. So I think my next one in the pipe is A Brave New World. I think there's something about the last few years that are drawing me towards like this dystopian fiction. So
Feels
Yeah,
appropriate.
wonder what it
Wonder
could
why.
be.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I just went through A Brave New World and Dune.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
I feel like it's
they hit harder now for some reason than they did 15 years ago.
Perspective.
yeah.
Been through some stuff.
Yeah,
You have a couple miles under your belt, and you're like, ugh, oof. This wasn't supposed to be a how-to manual.
right.
Well, Andrew, we're running up on time. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. I'm glad we got to talk quantum because I'm not really supposed to be doing that here for various reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks. And where can we find you? So if someone's looking for you, they want to look at what you guys are working on. Where do they go?
Yeah, so byautomata.io, byautomata.io is our company website. And also, I'm working on being more active on LinkedIn these days, so you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. And we'll link that up for anyone who's watching.
Cool.
Andrew, thanks so much. We really appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye.